Hello everyone, this is Speak Entertainment and we are back again, and we're now going to talk about Blood of Zeus, the recent Netflix anime fantasy series, and this will be a review of the first season, which consisted of 8 episodes, and I warn you now, there will be spoilers, so if you haven't caught up with all of the episodes of the season yet, I advise you to stop watching now, go away, catch up with the series on Netflix, and then come back to this review. Now, I did previously give my first initial impressions of the first episode of Blood and Zeus, and you can locate that on the anime playlist within the channel. But we're now going to talk about the season overall as a whole. So as I mentioned in my first impressions video, the setup that we have for Blood and Zeus is that we are based in ancient Greece, dealing with an emergence of a large demon army which is wreaking havoc over their land, and they inhabit human bodies, and they have this kind of zombie like effect where they inhabit humans and then transform into much more powerful zombies. And over time the Greek army are trying to infiltrate and stop this demonic army from taking over ancient Greece. And over the course of the story we come across the main protagonist of the story named Hera, who is a young boy, and over the course of the story we find out that he has to embrace his destiny as he is the son of Zeus, and he has to fight his way up, overall become the main fighter to defeat this upcoming evil forces. We have the main leader of the demonic group known as Seraphim, and over the course of the story we find out more about his own origins and his own motivations and why he wants to indeed take over ancient Greece with this vast army. And we also get an involvement of the gods. So if you know anything about your Greek mythology, this includes of course Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Apollo, Hermes, etc. And we see as well their various agendas and motivations for why they are involved in the conflict. So what's good about Blood and Zeus? Why is it getting a lot of rave reviews and a lot of critical reception? Well, for me, I think what's good about it is that it's a very vivid and serious anime, very bold in its storytelling, and I think that's always great to see. I think a lot of the problem with today's anime is that it's very much of style over substance. So we get the flashy visuals and the smooth animation, but the storytelling and characterization really lacking. Blood of Zeus is a nice change in the dynamic of anime today, is that we get a really strong serialized story. As I mentioned before in my first impressions, this is really a heavy fusion of the likes of Game of Thrones, Clash of the Titans, Conan the Barbarian, Lord of the Rings. It is very violent at times, and the acts of violence are very shocking. No character is really safe at one point or another, and we really get some brutal killings involving men, children and women as well. So it really doesn't hold back on this, and I think what's also good about it is that it's not gratuitous. It doesn't just kill people for the sake of it. When the violence comes, it's really to show the harsh natures of the current time that we are watching on here. So it's very much adult orientated, it's very intelligent, and it's very strong in its storytelling, and I think that's a pleasure to see. The animation as well is very clean and crisp. Some people are alluding to the frame rate of the animation and they feel that it doesn't flow as well, and they feel sometimes that certain framings are a bit stiff. I didn't really get that. I found the animation to be of a very high standard. All of the colours and the effects and the contrast is all great to see. It all flows very well and it's all visually pleasing on the eyes. I think one of the best aspects of Blood of Zeus is when it delves into the character origins and their backstories. Particularly episodes 2, 3 and 4 are really strong in this and very compelling when we see the backstories of particularly of Hera, where we learn his origins, and episode 4 I believe is very much of a standout when we learn about Seraphim's origin, where we learn as a young kid he was very much abandoned and left out in the wilderness to fend for himself. He gets taken into care and we get some really brutal and violent scenes where we see his carers get brutally murdered, and we learn that he has to fend for himself before he comes across the demonic army. And that's a very vivid episode, and I think it's great how it really takes the time to build into certain characters and gives us time as viewers to really digest where they come from and their motivations and their agendas. And the god characters as well, as I mentioned before, they actually remain for me, the most compelling characters of the season. Hera is a great villain, and I think she's probably the main antagonist of this piece. Her ongoing battle with Zeus is really the catalyst of the main conflict. We get to see the gods really exhibit their special abilities and powers, and it's a really visual pleasure to see. It's very much a feast for the eyes as we see them involved in a major battle against a demonic army. It's fantastic to watch. There's very much of a visual splendor and imagination that this show has. It really doesn't hold back in terms of how it wants to show these gods at their most powerful. The finale in particular is a spectacular, very standout episode. So what were the weak points about Blood of Zeus? Well, I think one of the weaker points were the human protagonists, and I'm mainly talking about Hera and Athena. They just weren't very strong characters overall. Hera is, I hate to say it, a bit of a bland character. There's no real charm or personality towards him, and he actually feels a secondary character as we focus much more on Seraphim and the gods. Towards the end of the season, yes, we do get a lot more focus on Hera and his training and preparation, but even then he just still feels like someone who's much on the periphery, and I think the same can be said as well for Alexia as well. She really doesn't have that much of an involvement or a presence. Despite being the leader of the Greek forces, we don't really cut that much deeper into her characters. We do get a few supporting characters that join with Hera later on in the piece, and I think they're the kind of comic relief. We see them dropping one-liners here and there, and there's a bit of camaraderie between them, but again, nothing too substantial. So I think if it's the weak point, it is the main protagonists of the show. And as I mentioned before, the real main interesting characters are Zeus, Hera and Seraphim as well. And Seraphim started off very well as a villain. There was much more of a mystique about him, and this was emphasised even more so as a character when we learnt about his origins. But we get a twist later on in the season when we find out that it's really Hera that is controlling him, and I think that undercuts Seraphim as a villain, because he's no longer the master of his universe, right? He's essentially a puppet for Hera. Now, this does change later on within the finale, where we see Seraphim trying to wrestle more control, but I think it was an issue that I had throughout, is that it took away the menace level of Seraphim, the fact that he was really being controlled under Hera and doing her bidding. And this was another issue I had with the storyline, is that if we think about it, the main conflict is not even about the demonic army trying to take on the earth. The main conflict is between the gods. The conflict we have established here is that Hera is a woman scorned because of Zeus's continued affairs with earth women, so she feels very much betrayed. So she wants to start this demonic earth and have them conquer the world and kill Hera, because she knows that that is the son of Zeus. So if we think about it, the conflict is amongst the gods. So I was watching this and I was thinking to myself, why are they building up this demonic army, wanting to take over Earth? Why do they not just fight themselves? We generally see that the gods are the most powerful characters amongst all of ancient Greece. So if Hera really has a grudge against Zeus, why doesn't he just battle him himself? Why does she have to go on this elaborate plan, getting other people involved and putting the whole earth at risk? And we really find this out to her detriment in the finale as well, when it comes to her end, when we see the demonic army really come together in their full forces. So that was a problem I had with the storyline. I think while the gods were really the most interesting characters of the piece, I think they were maybe used too much. You know, generally the standard narrative when you're dealing with these fantasy epics is that the gods come from a time before, and then the current narrative that we're in is that it's the time of men and the gods kind of take a back seat. But here they really are at the forefront, and to be honest, you really could have taken Hera and Alexia out of the story and it would have been no worse off. The more interesting and more purposeful characters are the gods, and that is particularly the case for most of the finale episode. It's only really at the end that we do get a confrontation between Hera and Seraphim, which is very well handled, I would agree, but again, it just feels a bit secondary. They don't feel quite as pivotal and important to the battle as what the god characters are, despite the spectacular finale that we get. So My overall score, if I wanted to give a score for Blood of Zeus Season 1, I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. It's pleasantly surprising that we can get a modern anime today that really has a strong serialized story arc, very adult orientated but not overly gratuitous. It's very spectacular and very vivid, lots of imagination, great cinematic visuals and amazing score. So I think it's a very satisfying and entertaining and exciting fantasy epic that we get for the first season. We do get an end credit scene where we see the reveal of Hades as Seraphim is defeated, and I guess he's delving into the underworld and maybe he has to do some sort of deal with Hades, and he's kind of in anguish because once again he has to make fruition when we go into season 2. Hopefully we will see a season 2 in the long run. But overall, I was very pleased of Blood. What were your own thoughts about this? Did you think it with anime or animation framing, or indeed some of the storyline? Did you like the main protagonists? Did it really stand out as much and need more development? Did you feel the gods kind of took the spotlight too much, or were you happy that there was more focus on the gods than Zeus? C1. Let me know what you think they animate in the future. This is coming on the first season on Attack on Titan, and I will continue to, of course, provide you with more classic animes from the 80s and 90s era for now. And I will see you very, very soon.